Hello, and welcome to this Agile Fundamentals course. The key objectives of this training are to understand what Agile is at the level of practices, principles, and values. We have divided this course in two different parts. In the first part, you will get a basic understanding of Agile values and principles. Find out where Agile works best, and what is the difference between Agile and Waterfall. In the second part, you will learn about two most popular Agile frameworks, Scrum and Kanban. At the end of this training, you will have a good understanding of the Agile values and principles, and you will be able to make the difference between Agile and traditional approaches. You will also understand Scrum and the different terms used in this process, and finally, you will be able to utilize Kanban to maintain a high level of production without overloading your teams. So let's just get started. What is Agile? There is a lot of misunderstanding nowadays around Agile. A lot of people will say it's a methodology, a framework, or a specific way of developing software where we all have to stand up in our meetings. But the truth is, Agile is not a methodology, nor a specific way of developing software. Agile is a mindset, a set of values and principles that help organizations create great products. Back in 2001, 17 people gathered in Utah in US. They were looking to define common grounds and a new way of thinking. They needed something different to the traditional way of working in order to keep up with customer needs and our evolving world. And this is where the Agile Manifesto was born. The Agile Manifesto focuses on 4 values and 12 principles. The 4 values of Agile are: 1. Individuals and interactions offer processes and tools. A business with passionate teams will be a successful business, even more if it uses good processes. However, the processes are not magical and do not replace content. Committed and passionate teams will create a valuable product and the content to convince. 2. Work in software over comprehensive documentation. What you need to understand here is that documentation is important. However, a development team should focus on producing functionalities, not writing documents. 3. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. A key element of the Agile mindset is putting people first. Agile is a user-centered approach. Including the customers in each iteration, and therefore in all the development phases, makes it possible to collect their feedback. 4. Responding to change over following a plan. We must be able to react quickly to change. If a new event occurs, the team must be able to incorporate these changes into the current developments. Any new element becomes an opportunity to add value instead of an obstacle to avoid. One of the most important words in these 4 values is the word over. The Agile values don't imply that we need to stop using the elements on the right. Indeed, the Agile Manifesto says that while there is a value in the items on the right, we value the items on the left more. Now, let's take a look to the 12 Agile principles that support the Agile values. These principles are about customer satisfaction. The Agile Manifesto insists that customers are the center of attention. We will do our best to involve them as much as possible during the different phases of product development. Embrace changes. We do our best to be in the ideal conditions to change part of the scope if necessary. Speed delivery. The fact of regularly delivering functionalities or pieces of functionalities makes it possible to gather more regular feedbacks, which will allow a better adaptation of the product if necessary. Collaboration. To ensure that you have a product closer to what is expected, it is very important that the client and the development teams work collaboratively. Empowerment. By empowering the team, providing them with a more safe environment, and trusting them, we are more likely to have productive teams. Effective communication. Interaction is essential for a better communication. Communication is the key to success, and the face-to-face communication is much more recommended than emails or any other type of communication. Good metrics. When you measure the progress of a product, the Agile Manifesto reminds you that you only measure what is finished. Anything started but not finished is considered to be 0% progress. Steadiness. No need to work day and night to develop your product. Teams working long days are no more productive than those working sustainably. Operational excellence. The Agile Manifesto insists on the need to put quality in the products in order to minimize the risk of bugs and to ensure continuity of future developments. Simplicity. The Agile Manifesto constantly reminds us that we should only develop what is strictly necessary. We only develop the current requests and nothing more. Self-organization. Indeed, we will let the team self-organize. Team members need to find out by themselves how to be as efficient as possible. We will leave the choices to the teams, and we shouldn't impose unnecessary processes to them. Last, continuous improvement. Continuous improvement is essential with the Agile mindset, and everywhere else. We can always improve our way of doing things and our organization. This is why the Agile Manifesto insists on the continuous improvement. These principles are very general and are less about giving you a specific way to do things, but more about giving you the foundation to make good decisions in different situations. Let's take a look now at the differences between Agile and traditional way of working, also called Waterfall. Several years ago, projects were managed in Waterfall, where tasks are executed in phases, in a linear and sequential way. Progress flows downwards in one direction like a waterfall. Each of these phases represents a distinct stage, and each stage generally finishes before the next one can begin. Let's take an example. Our customer needs a car to be able to go to work. If we decide to build this product in a waterfall way, we will start by defining what the ideal car should look like. After several weeks or months of thinking, and once this phase is done, we start building the car. First the wheels, then the engine, the frame, then we assemble everything and deliver it to the customer. What happens here is that during the first phases, the customer is not receiving anything for a long period of time. If we are optimistic, he is happy with the car you gave him. But the customer might say that this is not the car he was expecting, and he doesn't like this design. In this case, changing the design will be very expensive. If we try to visualize the value delivered to the client, we can see that the client will wait a long period of time before receiving some value, a product that he can use. In terms of transparency, Waterfall does not require a great customer involvement. So the customers are not involved and don't have any view on what the teams are working on. The risk is high since we do not know exactly if we are working on the right thing. This risk will remain high until we deliver the product, and it might stay high if the customer is not satisfied at the end. And finally, in terms of cost of change, given that each phase adds a significant amount of work, if at the end the client asks us to change something, we must change all phases to meet his needs, which will cost a lot of money. Agile came to solve these issues. With the 4 values and the 12 principles, we create things differently. In Agile, we build products incrementally and iteratively, which helps teams deliver value to their customers faster and with fewer headaches. Instead of betting everything on a big bang launch, an Agile team delivers work in small but consumable increments. We start with a small piece of work and we go through the design, development, testing, and deployment. The feedback from the customer and stakeholders is then collected and fed back into the cycle. Let's take our previous example of building a car for a customer. If we decide to build this car in an agile way, we will involve the customer on a regular basis, and we will ask him for input and feedback while building his car. We can start with a minimum viable product, the least expensive product that can allow us to test our idea and for him to try it. Based on his feedback, we can improve it and add new functionalities. At the end, and as the customer was involved all the time and his feedback was acted on, we know we are delivering exactly what he expects. In Agile, the value is delivered to the customer faster, since we deliver in small increments and we start with a minimum viable product. The client is involved all the time while creating the product, and therefore, we have full transparency on the work being accomplished. The risk decreases more quickly. Again, given that we take into account customer feedback, we know that we deliver exactly what he asks for. And finally, in terms of cost of change, if after an iteration the client says that he does not like what we have created, it is only one iteration that we have lost, and we can change it quickly. The cost of change will therefore be lower. There is one important thing between these two ways of working. In Waterfall, we cannot stop before we deliver the full product defined at the beginning. In Agile, as we are delivering each iteration a functioning product, the customer might say that he is happy with what you just presented, and he doesn't need more. So we don't have to spend more money to add additional features that the customer doesn't need. One of the first decisions we face for any project implementation is which way of working should we use. Choosing Agile or Waterfall depends on the complexity level of the problem you are trying to solve. One way to understand complexity is through the Stacy matrix. This model is designed to support decision-making and choose appropriate way of working depending on each situation. The Stacy matrix has two dimensions. The first axis is the requirements axis, or the what. On the bottom of the axis, we know exactly what we want to build, and we all agree on the goals and have the same understanding of the expected outcome. On top, it's the opposite. No agreed requirements and no alignment on expectations. The second one is the implementation axis, or the how. The more we are close to the left side, the more we know how to build this product, and we can learn from past experiences. If we go to the right side, these problems are required to deliver something that is new and innovative. Let's take a look now to the four areas of the Stacy matrix. On one side of the Stacy matrix, we have simple problems. Simple problems are well defined and easy to solve. We know exactly what we have to do and how we can do it. Any size projects with clear activities and repeatable results fits in this category. It has been done multiple times before, and best practices exist. In this area, traditional methods and approaches, such as Waterfall, are most effective. At the other side of the matrix, this is the chaos area. In this area, there is no agreement on what we want to do and no certainty on how to do things. We can observe two situations in this area. Either we are in chaos because of a natural disaster, for example. Stock markets are going down. The COVID-19 pandemic hits our planet. And it's a general panic. We don't know really what to do nor how to do things. In these situations, someone needs to take a decision to act fast, like selling or buying stocks, or putting people in quarantine. Another situation could be that we are trying to build a new product, but we don't know what we can have in it, nor how to do things. And in this case, by using some well-known technologies, such as design thinking, we can create more clarity in the requirements and move out of this area to the complexity zone. This area combines the complicated and the complex problems. In this area, the traditional approaches are not effective as there is a high level of unpredictability. This area stands for high risk and uncertainty and requires a high feedback frequency. There is a high level of uncertainty in terms of what you have to do and how you want to do it. In this context, we should use a more explorative approach with transparency, frequent inspection, and adaptation. Scrum as an agile framework is a good example for such process. I like to call the complexity zone the sweet spot for agile, as it requires fast feedback and a close collaboration with the customer. In an adapted version of the Stacy matrix, a third axis is often added to the model, and it presents the number of people involved. The idea is that the more we add people on a certain activity, the more complex it becomes. A task that is simple for one person may be very complex for a group. Picking a movie to watch is easy on your own, but it may become very complex with a group of friends. As discussed earlier, Agile is a mindset, a set of values and principles. There are several frameworks that are aligned with the values and principles of Agile. There is Scrum and Kanban, the two most used frameworks in the Agile world today. And there are also several other frameworks more or less used and that are also aligned with the Agile mindset, such as DSDM, Feature-Driven Development, Extreme Programming, and Crystal Clear. And in the recent years, we have started to see new frameworks that help managing several Agile teams at scale, such as SAFe for Scaled Agile Framework or LESS for Large-Scale Scrum. In the next sections, we will be going through the two most used frameworks at the level of the team, Scrum and Kanban. Scrum is based on the theory of empirical process control, or empiricism, which states that knowledge comes from experience and decision-making is based on known facts. Scrum rests on three fundamental pillars. It is about transparency, inspection, and adaptation. These three pillars are closely related to each other. Scrum is ideal for solving complex problems. The predictive approach is useless because it is difficult, if not impossible, to predict the future in this case. We generally start by creating transparency. Transparency helps to make the problems visible. A Scrum team is transparent in terms of work to be accomplished. The data and information concerning the product are available, visible, and understood by all. Once the problems are visible, they must be inspected. And thanks to this inspection, we can then adapt by taking actions that aim at improving the situation. Given the complexity that can be encountered, the most effective method is therefore to carry out a series of transparency, inspection, and adaptation to get closer to the desired results. The work done in Scrum requires that the team's processes and interactions are based on a set of values. First, courage. Let's create an environment where failure is seen as an opportunity to learn and progress. By working in small iterations, the team can use this continuous improvement cycle to position themselves on the path to lasting success. Daring to fail requires courage. Focus. Each Scrum teams define a goal in which each member of the team recognizes himself. This shared vision makes it possible to make all the members of a team work in the same direction to avoid conflicts of interest during collaboration. Commitment. Scrum teams are going to commit to producing, taking their autonomy, making strong decisions about the product. Without commitment, the implementation of Scrum will not work. Fourth, respect. Respect and be respected. Knowing how to listen and take into account each other's opinion while sharing their own vision is the basis of respect. And last, openness. Team members communicate about how they work, what keeps them from working well, or what worries them, to deal with it together. By adopting the following 5 values, the team contributes even more to their health and success. The objective of these Scrum values is to bring out the implementation of the 3 Scrum pillars: transparency, inspection, and adaptation. Scrum is one of the most popular Agile frameworks. It describes a set of meetings, roles, and artifacts that help teams structure and manage their work. So how does Scrum work? It all starts with a vision. The product owner has the responsibility to speak with stakeholders and customers and translate their wishes into the product backlog, a prioritized list of items that the team should work on. We call these items user stories. The team can start their sprint. Sprint is a time-boxed iteration between 1 to 4 weeks maximum. The first meeting in the sprint is the sprint planning. Based on their capacity, the development team will pull the highest priorities user stories from the product's backlog into their sprint backlog. The development team will then break down these user stories into smaller tasks and discuss how they want to achieve the work. Every day, the team will meet in the daily Scrum, a short communication meeting of 15 minutes maximum. The team members will discuss quickly and transparently the progress of their work and solve any impediments that prevent them from delivering on the sprint goal. At the end of the sprint, the team invites the stakeholders to the sprint review. This is their time to showcase their potentially shippable product and get feedback on the work accomplished. The feedback will be translated to new user stories in the product's backlog. The team then will have their final meeting of the sprint, which is the sprint retrospective. They will discuss what went well, what didn't go well, and how they can improve their process in the next sprint. The cycle will start again, and the team will pick up the next priority from the product's backlog. One activity that the Scrum team can hold during their sprint is the backlog refinement. This can happen anytime the team needs to work on their product's backlog to clarify some user stories and estimate them. The team will also create a definition of ready, a checklist that will help them define whether a user story is ready to be taken and worked on in a sprint or not. They will also create a definition of done that can be used at the end of the sprint. This definition of done will help them to have a shared understanding of what it means for work to be completed. The Scrum Master will have the responsibility to facilitate the process and to help the team perform at the highest level. This may include removing impediments, facilitating meetings, and helping the product owner refine the backlog. As previously discussed, the Scrum framework defines 3 roles, 5 ceremonies, and 3 artifacts. The Scrum team consists of 3 roles, the only 3 roles needed in Scrum, and they are all important. The 3 main roles in Scrum are the product owner, who is responsible for defining the product, the Scrum Master, who makes sure that Scrum is understood by everyone, and finally, the development team, who is responsible for transforming the needs expressed by the product owner into a functioning product. The product owner is responsible of the what's. He is responsible for defining the goal and vision. Why do we need to work on this product? And what is the value that it will bring the customer? what are the features this product should have, and he should make sure that the team builds the right thing. In short, the product owner is responsible for building the right thing. The development team is responsible of the how. The members of the team are responsible for building the product with the right quality, and no one has the authority to tell them how to do their job. They are responsible for building the thing right. And finally, we have the Scrum Master, who is responsible for helping the team to self-organize and facilitate any team obstacles. He is helping the team to build the thing fast and well. Scrum has broadened the word developer to include not only engineers, but anyone involved in the creation of the product. The development team is a self-organized and multidisciplinary unit. They decide how to accomplish the work defined by the product owner. The team has all the necessary skills to finish the user stories. This development team should be empowered to do what is necessary to manage its own work and meet the sprint objective. So no one has the authority to tell the development team how to do their job. The development team should ideally be co-located and dedicated to one single product. And the ideal size for a development team is between 3 to 9 people. Less than 3, and the team could not accomplish enough in each sprint. More than 9, and the communication becomes very complex. The Scrum Master is what we call a servant leader for the Scrum team. Scrum Masters help the Scrum team perform at their highest level. They do that by holding Scrum team members accountable for their commitment, Scrum values, and framework. Scrum Masters are responsible for the process. They must ensure that Scrum is understood and implemented, and make sure that the team adheres to Scrum theories, practices, and rules. He helps and protects the team by facilitating the resolution of obstacles that block the team's progress. He helped to create a high-performing team. The Scrum Master must understand team dynamics in order to help this team become more effective. And finally, the Scrum Master can facilitate the different Scrum ceremonies and the process in general. On a large scale, the Scrum Master serves the development team, the product owner, and the entire organization. He serves the development team by creating a high-performing team and by facilitating the Scrum framework. He supports the product owner by helping him to find effective techniques for managing the product's backlog and to plan the work with the team so they can deliver the highest customer value. Finally, the Scrum Master acts as an organizational change agent, serving the organization as a whole, helping them understand the Agile mindset and the Scrum process and values. The product owner. The product owner is visionary. He must define the product vision and communicate this vision transparently to all stakeholders. He must also translate this vision into his product's backlog. He is the ultimate responsible for maintaining and managing this product backlog, and he must ensure that the product's backlog is visible and the priorities are known by everyone. The product owner must be empowered to make decisions about what should or should not be added to the product in order to maximize the value provided by the team. He must also be able to work with the team and stakeholders, and sometimes refuse stakeholders' requests if what they have asked for does not provide great value to the customers. And for this reason, product owners must be qualified. They must have an in-depth knowledge of the company, the customer, and the market to be able to make decisions. Finally, the product owner must be available to the team, stakeholders, and customers to answer questions and clarify requirements when needed. As a summary, the product owner must maximize the value of the product. He is responsible for managing the product's backlog, decides what to create and when to deliver, and he represents the stakeholders and customers to the development team. Now that we know more about the Scrum roles, these roles are often not used effectively. And there are some dysfunctions that take place in organization that I would like to address in this video. Some of these anti-patterns are: not all roles exist. For example, 1 or 2 roles are not existing. Combined roles. Hierarchy exists between certain roles. Eliminating these dysfunctions will greatly increase the effectiveness of your Scrum teams in your organization. But first, let's take a closer look at these dysfunctions. All roles within Scrum are here for a reason and cannot be left aside. This may be surprising, but I have seen cases where all roles have been left out, even the development team. This makes it quite difficult to create a functioning product. All the roles are necessary in Scrum to be able to create products in this complex environment. A team that does not have all of these roles cannot be called a Scrum team. Forgetting one of these roles will hinder the progress of your product. What will happen if the product owner does not exist? I have seen cases where the important work of the product owner is left entirely to the development team, leaving them not only responsible for producing a high-quality product, but also to manage stakeholders, maintaining the vision and roadmap, talking to customers. You can perhaps imagine what this will do to the development team and its progress with no focus at all. The product owner's goal is to maximize the value provided by the development team, and therefore, he deserves his own role. Now, what about if the Scrum Master does not exist? This role is most often ignored, and one of the reasons is that the role of the Scrum Master is often not well understood. This is not surprising, as this role differs the most from what we are used to in product development and projects. Sometimes the existing role of a project manager takes the place of the Scrum Master. Sometimes the product owner also assumes the role of Scrum Master, a problem I will address later. But to summarize, the Scrum Master promotes empiricism and ensures that Scrum is understood by all. So this role is very important to the success of a Scrum team. And finally, what happens if the development team does not exist? Can you even imagine what you would do without the development team? This multifunctional and self-organized team that will work to achieve the sprint objectives. You might think that there would be no way around this large group of people. However, I have seen cases where the product owner and Scrum Master also act as a development team. Or the development team is composed only of people with the same skill set, which ultimately prevents them from delivering a functioning product. The development team is necessary to be able to deliver customer value iteratively by ensuring the delivery of a functioning and quality product. Not considering certain roles is often linked to reasons of efficiency. The reason why combining roles is not a good idea is because of the loss of focus. Each role has its own purpose, and because each role is equally important and serves the other 2 roles in one or more ways, combining them is not a good idea. Combining the product owner and the Scrum Master role should be avoided at all costs. There hasn't been a single case where I have seen this work. Not only is the amount of work that these roles take on is enormous and would make for an 80-hour work week, but the 2 roles also requires a different skill set and therefore should not be combined. Another anti-pattern is when we have a hierarchy between the roles. You may be wondering why the existence of a hierarchy would be a problem for the Scrum team. Often, the product owner is in charge of the development team, and sometimes, in organizations, this person is even the line manager of other people on the Scrum team. The starting point for Scrum to be effective is for the team to self-organize. This means that each role is equally important, with its own goals and responsibilities, and a Scrum team cannot exist without all of these roles. To summarize, all Scrum roles are important within the Scrum framework, each with their own purpose, responsibility, and service to the other roles. Together, they form a multidisciplinary and self-organized team that can create excellent products and services in complex environments. Forgetting one of the roles means that there is no Scrum team, and therefore no Scrum. The combination of roles make the team less efficient and even disable it, despite some possible efficiency gains. And each role serves the other two roles in different ways, creating an effective combined Scrum team. As seen previously, Scrum is a set of ceremonies, roles, and artifacts. In this section, we will take a closer look to the purpose of the different Scrum ceremonies. We will discuss the sprint, sprint planning, daily Scrum, sprint review, and the sprint retrospective. We will also explain the purpose of the product backlog refinement, which is not an official Scrum ceremony, but rather an activity that the team performed during the sprint. The main event in Scrum is the sprint. Sprint is at the heart of Scrum. It's a time-boxed iteration, and its duration varies from 1 to 4 weeks maximum. Within a sprint, the team sets their target with the product owner as a sprint goal and plan their work in the sprint backlog. As soon as the sprint starts, the team works together to complete the planned work effectively and make it ready for review by the end of that period. The duration of a sprint is defined by the Scrum team. Once the team reaches an agreement for how many days a sprint should last, all future sprints should be the same. A sprint can be cancelled before the sprint time box is over. Only the product owner has the authority to cancel the sprint, and of course, the product owner can decide to cancel the sprint based on recommendation from stakeholders, development team, or the Scrum Master. A sprint would be cancelled if the sprint goal becomes obsolete. This might happen if the company changes direction, or if market or technology conditions change. In general, a sprint should be cancelled if it no longer makes sense given the circumstances. And last, a new sprint will start immediately after the previous one is finished. Sprint planning is the first event in Scrum. It kicks off the sprint. The purpose of this ceremony is to define what can be delivered in the sprint and how will the work needed to realize the sprint goal be done. A great starting point for the sprint planning is the product backlog, as it provides a list of ready items that could potentially be part of the sprint. The team should also look at the previous work done in the increment to have a view on their capacity. The sprint planning is split in two parts. The first part is related to the what. Based on the product backlog, the product owner describes the goal of the sprint, what product backlog items contribute to that goal, and clarifies any final details. Depending on their capacity, the development team decides how many items they can accomplish during the upcoming sprint. These elements represent the team's sprint backlog. The Scrum team will then set a sprint goal. This is the goal that the team will have to achieve during the sprint by implementing these items. In the second part of the sprint planning, and once the sprint goal has been set and the sprint backlog defined, the development team decides how the work will be done, what they will do during the sprint to deliver the sprint goal, break up the work in smaller pieces, and perform some high-level design. At the end of the sprint planning, the development team should be able to describe to the product owner and the Scrum Master how they intend to organize themselves to achieve the goal of the sprint. Once the Scrum team has defined their sprint goal and their sprint backlog, the sprint can start. The team will meet every day in the daily Scrum. The purpose of the daily Scrum is for the development team to synchronize its activities, inspect progress towards the sprint goal, and create a plan for the next 24 hours. The daily Scrum is a 15-minute time-boxed event held every day of the sprint at the same time and same place. In the daily Scrum, only the development team is mandatory. The product owner is welcome to join as an observer, and the Scrum Master as a facilitator to ensure that the development team has the meeting. But the development team is responsible for conducting the daily Scrum, and it is mainly for them to answer these 3 questions. What did I do yesterday that helped the development team meet the sprint goal? What will I do today to help the development team meet the sprint goal? Do I see any impediments that prevents me or the development team from meeting the sprint goal? If some of the team members need to have extended discussion, then they can meet immediately after the daily Scrum. The daily Scrum helps to improve the communication and eliminate other meetings. It's the best opportunity for teams to share their impediments, to highlight and promote quick decision making. This is a key inspect and adapt meeting. The sprint review is held at the end of the sprint. It is designed to gather actionable feedback on what the team has completed. The product owner will invite the stakeholders to the sprint review. The increment is assessed against the sprint goal designed by the Scrum team. The team will showcase their work in product to the stakeholders and then ask them for feedback on how to make the product better. The product owner incorporates the lessons learned during the conversation into the product backlog. This meeting is time-boxed to no more than an hour per week of sprints. So a 2-week sprint would have a 2-hour sprint review, and the 1-week sprint a 1-hour sprint review. The sprint retrospective is the final event of the sprint, and it is time-boxed to 3 hours maximum for a 4-week sprint. It is an opportunity for the Scrum team to inspect and adapt the process and to identify opportunities for improvement. The purpose of the sprint retrospective is to inspect what went well in the last sprint with regards to people, relationships, process, and tools, identify what didn't go so well in the sprint, and create a plan for improvements to the way the Scrum team does its work. Implementing these improvements in the next sprint is the adaptation to the inspection of the Scrum team itself. Of course, improvements can be implemented at any time, but the sprint retrospective provides a formal opportunity to focus on inspection and adaptation. The backlog refinement is not an official ceremony in Scrum, but rather an ongoing activity that the Scrum team can hold during the sprint, in which the product owner and the development team collaborate on the details of product backlog items. Product backlog refinement is the act of clarifying items, adding details, splitting bigger items into smaller ones, adding and discussing new items, estimating or re-estimating items, and ordering these items in the product backlog. The Scrum team decides how and when refinement is done. Refinement usually consumes no more than 10% of the capacity of the development team. However, product backlog items can be updated at any time by the product owner or by the team after discussing it with the product owner. The backlog refinement helps to ensure that the product backlog remains populated with items that are relevant, detailed, estimated, and prioritized. This is a main activity in the Scrum cycle. A lot of time will be saved in sprint planning meetings if the backlog is well maintained. Scrum artifacts provide key information that the Scrum team and stakeholders need to know in order to understand the products under development, the planned activities, and other activities that are part of the project. These artifacts have been designed to maximize transparency, which is one of the pillars of empiricism on which Scrum is founded. With this transparency, we can ensure that everyone has the same understanding of these artifacts and their usage. There are 3 artifacts that are defined in the Scrum framework: the product backlog, the sprint backlog, and the increments. There is also a transparency artifact in Scrum called the definition of done. And there is another artifact that is added to the list but not officially part of Scrum, and it is called the definition of ready. The purpose of this chapter is to understand these different artifacts. So let's get started. One of the key artifacts of Scrum is the idea of backlog, both at the product level as well as the sprint level. The product backlog is an ordered list of all the elements that we need to include in the products. Order is decided by the product owner, and usually driven by business value. The product backlog is the responsibility of the product owner. He is responsible for managing it, adding new items depending on customer needs, deleting items, and ordering them. Each element of the product backlog is defined in a very specific form called user story. User stories use non-technical language. It provides context for the teams and let them define what benefits the product will bring to their target audience. User stories drives collaboration, creativity, and a better product overall. A user story must include the following elements: the role, which is the target user or group of users of the functionality; the purpose, what the user wants; and finally, the desired value, why the functionality is required. The common user stories template includes the user, the action, and the value, and typically looks like this. As a user, I want an action, so that a reason or a value. Before writing a user story, you should know who the end users or the persona of your product are. And more important, what needs they have, which you are trying to cover. An example of a user story could be, as a casual shopper, I want to pay my order using my iPhone so that I do not have to carry my wallet around me. After reading a user story, the team knows why they are building what they are building and what value it creates. It is the smallest piece of work that represents some value to an end user and can be delivered during a sprint. It describes the why and the what behind the work of team members. Following the structure of a user story seems to be a bit strict. However, it is very important as it allows you to think about all the important details and ask the right questions. Each user story should have an estimate. The estimation exercise usually happens during the product backlog refinement activity. Estimating a user story consists of giving it a number of points that will qualify the effort needed to implement it. In traditional approaches, we use absolute estimation. The different tasks are evaluated in number of hours or in man-days. Scrum replaces this temporality with relative estimation. Teams will give each user story a number of points that reflects the efforts. In most cases, a story point uses the Fibonacci sequence as a scale for sizing. Some other teams will use t-shirt sizing as a measure. The advantage of using relative estimation to evaluate a user story is to allow team members with different skills and speed of execution to have an agreement on the effort required for a user story, which will be quite complicated to do if discussed in time. As discussed in the previous chapter, the product backlog is the source for the sprint backlog. The product backlog represents the list of all the elements that the product will contain, while the sprint backlog is the agreed scope for the next upcoming sprint. Each new sprint will have its own sprint backlog. So the sprint backlog is a list of tasks identified by the Scrum team to be completed during the sprints. During the sprint planning meeting, the team selects some number of user stories and identifies the tasks necessary to complete each user story. The sprint backlog is commonly maintained as a Kanban board to keep visible the work to be accomplished by the development team during the iteration. During the sprint, team members are expected to update the sprint backlog as new information is available, but minimally once per day. Many teams will do this during the daily Scrum. And the development team should only work on one backlog during a sprint. Once the sprint has started, the sprint backlog can no longer be changed during the period of the sprint. It can be changed, but only during the sprint planning meeting. The items and steps to complete them are frozen for the length of the sprint. If there are items left unfinished by the end of the sprint, they will be added back to the product backlog and addressed during the next sprint. Finally, the sprint backlog is a real-time and highly visible view of the work the team plans to accomplish during the sprint, and it is owned solely by the development team. The product increment is one of the most important Scrum artifacts in the Agile culture. During each sprint, the development team creates a product increment that represents all of the done elements of the current sprint, in addition to those already finalized in previous sprints. It is the integration of all the completed list of product backlog items. The product increment is a potentially shippable product. It can be put into production at the end of the sprint if needed, which means that at the end of each sprint, the increment should be tested, validated, and have the right quality so that it can be delivered in production. However, it is the product owner who is responsible for saying whether or not the team can deliver the product into production to users. The product increment is one of the most important artifacts because it will allow the development team to get customer feedback, which will allow them to improve their products. As described in the Scrum framework, during the sprint planning, the product owner will present the list of top prioritized items in the product backlog, and the team needs to pick the user stories they will be able to work on during the sprint, based on their capacity. However, in order to successfully pull items into the current sprint, it is important that the defined user stories are ready. Putting non-ready user stories into a sprint causes problems during the implementation cycle. If developers work on insufficiently detailed or undefined user stories, they are unlikely to produce high-quality code. Let's take the example of a customer going to our restaurant. He is asking the chef to make him a burger with a slice of cheese and fries. Before the chef starts cooking, he needs to check if he has all the necessary elements to start the order. Does he have all the ingredients for a burger and fries? Does he have a cooking stove, a pan, kitchen utensils? These are the elements that the chef cannot start without, and this represents the definition of ready for the chef to be able to cook any dish for his customers. The definition of ready is the checklist of what needs to be done on a user story before the team can start implementing it in the next sprint. Note that the definition of ready is not part of the Scrum Guide, and that is for a good reason. The definition of ready should not be used as a phase gate for sprint planning or as a way to push away responsibility. It should rather be a guideline for the team of what needs to be done during the backlog refinement. Most teams start out with an empty definition of ready, and then add elements to it when it's needed. It should grow and develop as the team evolves in terms of the working pace and the understanding of what makes a good user story. A typical definition of ready might look like this example. The user story is understood by the team. User story has clear business value. The user story is estimated. The user story is small. And the user story has acceptance criteria defined. At the end of the sprint, the team will invite the stakeholders to the sprint review to show them the completed user stories. These completed user stories should fulfill the definition of done. a checklist that defines when a user story is considered done. If we take the previous example with the chef at the restaurant, once he has completed the customer's order, we need to check if the order is really completed by checking all the necessary elements to close it. Did he deliver the order as per the acceptance criteria of the customer? Is it warm, delicious, delivered on time, well cooked? Is the food served in a nice plate? Is the pan and the kitchen utensils are cleaned? Are the remaining ingredients put back to their place? So this is the checklist that says that the chef is done with this order and it has been completed. Having a definition of done helps the team to make sure that the built product doesn't have any undone work and it is ready to be shipped. Definition of done is a checklist of the work that the team is supposed to finish successfully before declaring the work to be potentially shippable. An example of the definition of done: the user story is built without errors. The user story is tested against the acceptance criteria. It is demoed to the stakeholders, accepted by the product owner. The documentation is updated. One important thing to keep in mind is that the definition of done and the acceptance criteria are not the same. The difference between these two is that the definition of done is common for all user stories, while the acceptance criteria is applicable to a specific user story. Acceptance criteria of each user story will be different based on the requirements of that user story. But in all cases, both definition of done and acceptance criteria must be met in order to complete the user story. Both definition of done and definition of ready are typically discussed during the retrospective. The team then can edit them and extend them based on new knowledge they have. In my experience, it pays to start with a very simple and basic definition of ready and definition of done, and most teams quickly will write this down collaboratively during an initial meeting before the project starts. In this chapter, we will talk about another Agile framework called Kanban. Kanban is a popular Agile framework. The first Kanban system was developed by Taishi Ono for Toyota in Japan in the early 40s. In order to optimize their production capacity and to be competitive with American companies. Kanban is a visual system for managing work as it moves through a process. It visualizes both the process and the actual work passing through that process. The goal of Kanban is to identify potential bottlenecks in your process, so you can fix them so work can flow through it effectively at an optimal speed. The Kanban method is a process to gradually improve whatever you do, whether it is software development, IT, staffing, recruitment, marketing and sales, and also procurement. In fact, almost any business function can benefit from applying the principles of the Kanban methodology. So let's now take a look to the different principles and practices of Kanban, and let's see also how does it really work in practice. The Kanban method follows a set of principles and practices for managing and improving the flow of work. It is a non-disruptive method that promotes gradual improvements to an organization's processes. Kanban has 4 foundational principles. Start with what you are doing now. Do not make any change to the existing process right away. Kanban must be applied directly to your current workflow, and any changes needed should be done over a period of time at a pace the team is comfortable with. Agree to pursue incremental, evolutionary change. As employees are generally resistant to radical changes, Kanban encourages making small changes over time, rather than big ones that might lead to resistance within the team and organization. Respect current roles, responsibilities, and job titles. In order to facilitate future changes, the fear of change must be eliminated. This can be done by maintaining and respecting each other's current roles, responsibilities, and professional titles. These three first principles help the organizations overcome the typical emotional resistance and the fear of change that usually follow any change initiatives in an organization. The last principle is leadership at all levels. Leadership acts don't have to come from senior managers only. People at all levels can provide ideas and show leadership to implement changes and continually improve the way they deliver their products and services. Let's take a look now to the core practices of the Kanban method. Visualize the flow of work to understand how the process in place works and how this work is delivered. Limit work in progress. Each stage of the workflow can only contain a maximum number of tasks at the same time. This helps the team members first finish what they are doing before taking up new tasks. Manage flow by showing the different steps of the workflow and the status of work in each stage. Once the workflow is defined and the work in progress limit is set, the team will observe either a continuous flow of work or tasks will start piling up as something gets blocked and starts to slow down the process. Make process policies explicit and visualize how the work is done. This will create a common basis for teams and the whole organization for how to do any type of work in the system. Implement feedback loops. Once the team understands the theory of the job, the processes, and the risks, they will be able to discuss problems or bottlenecks they are facing and find improvements to put in place. Improve collaboratively, evolve experimentally. Teams need to have a psychologically safe environment where experimentation is welcome and it is safe to fail. Otherwise, no one will try to make any effective changes. So how does Kanban work? Like Scrum, Kanban is a process designed to help teams work together more effectively. It is a good way to organize the process by visualizing and making the need for prioritization transparent and clear. Work items are represented visually on a Kanban board. Each team can draw their own process and visualize all the steps they go through when producing items, which help them to see the state of every piece of work at any time. Each step of the process has a work in progress limit, which is the maximum number of tasks that we can have in each step. If the team has too much work in progress, they risk decreasing the quality of the product. In Kanban, the team starts working on the highest priority items based on a pull system, which means we can't push an item into the next step, but the process will pull items when needed. And based on the work in progress limit for each step, team members can't pull more items than their capacity. This will help them to discover bottlenecks and find ways how to improve the process, and maybe start helping each other in the different steps to remove these impediments and let the work flow. Visualizing these items on the Kanban board will allow each team to measure their cycle time, which is the total time from when the team started working on an item to the time they delivered it. And they can measure also their lead time, which equals the total time it takes from receiving an order to delivering the item. These are two important metrics that will help the team find bottlenecks and define their improvement plan. Previously, we have discussed what Agile is, a mindset with a set of values and principles that help organizations create great products. Kanban and Scrum and many more are frameworks that help teams follow the Agile principles and get work done. Kanban and Scrum at their core are summarized by the premise stop starting, start finishing. All team members focus on getting all the tasks they are working on to done. In a nutshell, Scrum and Kanban have differences in many areas. In terms of cadence, Scrum has fixed duration from 1 to 4 weeks, and Kanban is based on a continuous flow and not enforcing any time limits. Scrum has 3 recommended roles: Product Owner, Scrum Master, and the development team. Kanban has no predefined roles, and it promotes to maintain and respect each other's current roles, responsibilities, and professional titles. In Scrum, once a sprint has started, the sprint's backlog cannot be altered until the end of the sprint, so teams should not make any changes during the sprints. While in Kanban, it is based on flexible scoping. Scope can be modified at any time, but the number of tasks is limited at each stage with the work in progress limit. For the way how these frameworks release their work, in Scrum, work is delivered in batches at the end of each sprint. In Kanban, as it is a continuous flow process, each task is delivered when it's completed. Teams in Scrum uses velocity as a measure to define their predictability. It guides how much work the Scrum team takes on in future sprints. In Kanban, they use cycle time and lead time, which is a measure on the average amount of time that it takes for a task to move from start to finish. Kanban teams strive to improve cycle time by working together on removing bottlenecks. Scrum is used when the product scope is almost clear and work can be planned. It is more appropriate in situations where work can be prioritized in batches. Kanban is used when there is very frequent changes in scope. It is more appropriate in operational environments with a high degree of variability and priority. As explained earlier, Kanban and Scrum at their core are summarized by the premise: stop starting, start finishing. Kanban is all about visualizing your work, limiting work in progress, and managing flow. Kanban teams focus on reducing the cycle time, the time it takes a task to go from start to finish. They do this by using a Kanban board and continuously improve their flow of work. Scrum teams commit to deliver a working product in short iterations called sprints. At the end of each sprint, the team invites the customer and show their product. The goal in Scrum is to create quick learning loops to gather and integrate customer feedback. In Scrum, teams adopt specific roles, create special artifacts, and hold regular ceremonies to keep things moving forward. While it is easy to point out the differences between Scrum practices and Kanban practices, their principles are largely the same. Both frameworks will help you build better products. Both Scrum and Kanban work by breaking down large and complex tasks in smaller ones to be completed efficiently. They place a high value on continuous improvement, optimization of the work and the process, and both share the focus on transparency and making the work visible that keeps all team members aligned. So before thinking whether you should choose Scrum or Kanban, don't ask Kanban versus Scrum, but instead ask Kanban or Scrum, or even Kanban and Scrum. Make it more about the principles than the practices. Doing Agile is not the same as being Agile. Doing Agile can be learned in a 2 to 3 days class that teach the basics of Scrum and Kanban. Being Agile requires much more: a cultural shift to an Agile mindset, as well as changes to the way employees are managed, motivated, trained, and hired. The human brain is divided into 2 major parts: the left and the right brain. The left brain is mostly logical facts. Using your left brain, you inspect and adapt, focus and deliver the right thing at the right time, apply various practices, and use numerous frameworks such as Scrum and Kanban. By using your left brain, you are doing Agile. The right brain is mostly feelings and intuitions. When using your right brain, you trust, you collaborate, you bring joy at work, learn continuously, bring in transparency, define the Agile culture, and finally, you live and breathe the 4 values and 12 principles of Agile. By using your right brain, you are being Agile. This is an important difference between people who are truly being Agile and those that are simply practicing Agile techniques. Focusing only on practices or frameworks without taking the Agile mindset into account compromises the Agile journey. This is because without the right mindset, it can be incredibly difficult to deal with complex issues in empirical environments and uncertain situations. Thank you for your participation to this Agile Fundamentals course. I hope it gave you a good introduction to Agile and to the common used frameworks, and that it will help you start your Agile journey as of today. Thank you and good luck for your Agile journey.